All right, so on worksheet 111, that first section, that group 1 through 6, we'll focus on that. We'll just look at each group individually. But guys, just in case you're not comfortable, let's just go through some of the buttons that we want you to know. Okay, and take notes on anything that you don't understand. Up here, when I hit a button, it's going to turn red. Okay, so you'll kind of know where I am. Hopefully, you found the on button. If you want to do anything that's in blue above it, you've got to hit that second, that blue one first, and then that. So if you did that, that should turn yours off. It won't appear. Your enter button here, okay, and we'll talk about why it might put something up there from previous answers. You've got a clear button here. We're going to use the left and right arrow keys a lot. Okay, so just left and the right. Usually using the up and the down for what we're going to do on graphing will mess things up. So just use left and right. We will be using this x variable. Okay, so that's your xt, theta, or n, depending on what you're in. And then you're also going to be using this y equals button to type in equations. Okay, the nice thing about this calculator, the CE, is that the y1 will graph in blue, the y2 will graph in red, and so on and so forth. Okay, so you'll see the different colors. And we'll be using these up here also. Okay, so I'll talk to you about window, zoom, trace, window, zoom, trace, and graph. Okay, we'll talk to you about all of those. But before we start, I want to point out one. So I am in y equals, if you just want to play with this for 1 second. I want you to look at F1, 2, 3, and 4. So notice they are green. So if you hit the alpha and then the F1, we really want you in this class and in pre-calc and AP calc to know where these buttons are. So what this is really going to do is it's going to simplify your fractions for you. So do you agree if I put in, I'm just going to hit 1, so this is a fraction. Notice it makes it look like a fraction. So if I wanted it to be 8 over 5, notice it's back to that horizontal fraction bar that I'm always emphasizing to you. It makes it look a little bit easier. Versus if I wasn't using that F1 format and I hit enter, the only way I would have to do 8/5 would be 8 divided by 5. And when you get really complicated problems, right, where we've got a complicated numerator and complicated denominator, it gets very confusing. Okay, because you have to have enough parentheses to make sure things are dividing and so on and so forth. So we do not want you to know how to use what I've typed in Y2. We want you to understand how to use that button for Y1. Okay, what's in there for Y1. And I don't care that you have this in Y1 or Y2 or not. I'm clearing them out. We're just saying that we want to make sure that you have this F1 button down. Okay, so fractions. What's the F to D? Anybody use that before? Fraction to decimal and decimal to fraction. So that's a handy button to know also. Okay, let's look at F2. So in F2, lots of different things that you'll use in different math classes. The one we're going to use, so if you're hunting and looking for absolute value, we'll be using the absolute value one. And then alpha F3, when we do matrices, they'll give you rows and columns. And alpha F4, okay, if you're ever looking for your Y1, Y2, your variables. Okay, like if you've lost something or you're hunting for something to type in, there's where it is. So play around and make a note on your note sheet. You've got to know F1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay? All right, so anyway, we'll go ahead and get back out of here, clear it out so you're at a home screen. So 1 through 6 says, use poly-zeros from your graphing calculator to solve. Okay, first thing you notice, solve means it's an equation. Means it's an equation, you've got an equal sign. I can only solve it on set equal to what? 0. Okay, so keep that in mind if there's anything you need to manipulate. Alright, so I'm looking at 1. Let's just do 1 together. Okay, and if you get stuck, ask somebody around you, ask me, whatever. Okay, but let's not get behind. So just make sure that you're asking. Okay, here we go. So this is an application. So if you go into apps, and you'll find poly-zeros 9. Okay. We are wanting to do the polynomial root finder. So number 1 is everybody at this point at least. Right here. Okay. All right. So order on number one, we're doing number one together, remember. Order and degree mean the same thing. What am I looking for when I say order or degree?
The amount of number you shows.
Not quite the number it shows, but
The highest power.
the highest power. The highest exponent, which in number one is what?
3.
Beautiful. Okay? So remember, you're going to use your left and right arrow key to highlight things, guys, or up and down on this screen. But once you highlight the 3, bless you, and push enter, okay, then you're just going to keep going. If you don't have that button, join somebody else and share so that you know how to run it. Okay? All right, so order is 3. For right now, why don't you guys just go ahead and keep everything on the left highlighted. So if yours is not, maybe just highlight everything on the left. And all that means is just going over it and pushing enter. That's how you highlight it. Okay. All right, now you're ready to go to the next screen. So notice, guys, this is over here, but the main, it should for you should be above like your F1. The help is probably above your F4, and the next is above your F5. So it means go ahead and hit that graph button. Go ahead.
Do I do real or complex roots?
We had real written there. All right, so then I just want you to see the different types, guys, see the different forms. So I'm going to cover that with a couple different problems. Okay. Ladies, are you okay? Yeah. Yeah? Okay, beautiful. All right, so on this, notice what's highlighted. You got to be very careful. Here's a mistake. Okay, so be careful. This button, okay, is your next to the enter, to the left of the enter. That is a negative sign. So if you're typing -6, you would use negative and then 6. On this format, notice they're putting plus for all of these. So when they highlight the signs, they want you to put a subtraction sign. Subtraction is like what's above the plus sign. So you just got to be careful. If you're ever having an issue, go back and check if you've used the negative versus a subtraction sign. And you'll see both of them here. So in 1, what's the coefficient in front of x cubed on this problem? It is a 1, so push 1 and enter. Now they want to know the sign. What's the sign for the next one? Yep, it's a minus. And then the number in front of x squared would be 6. Enter. The next sign is a plus. Enter. Number in front of x is an 11. Enter. The next sign is a minus, so subtract, enter, and 6. Enter. Do I have it entered correctly? Don't read it wrong for you. All right, again, then you've got these 5 keys down at the bottom that are going with these 5 keys at the top, 5 F1 to F5. We want to solve it, so go ahead and hit that. You should be getting x equals 1, 2, and 3. That's 3 answers. Would we expect 3 answers? Why? Because it's power, it's the cubic, it's the degree. Okay? Now, we've seen enough of this. Let's make some connections of what's happening. So if this were a graph, right, here's 1, 2, and 3, and I want you to be able to get it numbers. I want you to know how to interpret it and what the heck is happening. Okay, we know if a cubic has a positive coefficient in front, it goes up from kind of left to right, or it may curve back down. In other words, what's happening here, guys, is we are getting a graph that looks like this. Do cubics go on forever? Yep, so you need some arrows, right? Remember, your calculator is not going to always show you those details. And it's crossing at 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so what you're finding were those zeros. Does that make sense to be finding zeros if the equation was set equal to 0? Yeah. Okay? We're just making the calculator do the work for us in this section. So understand what you're finding now? Okay. Beautiful. Let's do number 2 together. Okay, so if you're trying to get back to just do another problem like this, you got to go back to the main screen. So that would be your F1. Again, we're doing a poly root finder. And what's the order on 2? Quickly. It is a 3. Okay, so we'll go ahead and keep it there. Tell it to go to the next. Coefficients, 1, enter. What's the next sign? Plus, okay, and then 5. I heard somebody say, what's the next sign? Minus, okay, and then 2. What's next? Ooh, I hear 0 and I hear -10. Who's right?
Well, you have to make it equal to 0. So
Exactly, you do have to make it equal to 0 first. So you had to do a little one step, right? What did you need to do? Subtract the 10. Okay, so this should say minus and 10. Perfect. We want to solve it. Go ahead.
well, I have a question.
Yeah.
On my calculator, I'm putting in the minus sign, but it keeps saying invalid input, but it works when I use a negative. So is it okay if I use a negative?
Is yours in the other format? Are yours going down?
Yes, they are.
That's what I'm about to teach you next. Yeah, if you're exactly on this calculator, this is the format, but there are 2 different formats. So yep, for what your calculator is doing, use the negative.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, and I'll show that here. Ours just doesn't do that until you get 4 or higher, okay, for the order.
Okay.
Are we all okay? Beautiful. All right, so then let's solve it. We're going to hit solve. Now, on number 2, we need to recognize, well, first of all, how many ounces is that? 3. Do we expect it to be 3?
Yeah.
Yes, because it's cubic, okay? You'll notice we expect these answers to be exact. What's an exact answer? Give me an example of an exact answer versus a decimal answer. 4/2. Yeah, that's an exact answer. So is 8/3 versus the approximation of what you get when you take that in a calculator. Okay? So you do need to know what we mean by exact answers. There are some of these that I do expect you to recognize, and I'll point them out when we get to them. 1.414 is the number you should know. It is √2. Yes. So you'll notice in the answers, we do expect this to be -5 and plus or minus √2. Okay, -5 and plus or minus √2. Meaning if you did this by hand, right, and you solve this, you would be able to get those exact answers. Okay? And I'll emphasize it to you. Now, let's also practice this. So AP standards, guys, and understand that I'm always going to go with AP standards, but I'll give you specific directions on quizzes and remind you of it. AP standard is that you always either round or truncate to the nearest thousand. How many places is the thousand? 3. Okay? I know in the workbook it's inconsistent. Sometimes it'll go 2 places, sometimes it'll go 4. If you just want to always do 3, that's fine with me. Okay? If you want to practice and ask me, just make sure you're rounding or truncating correctly. Let's make sure you know what I mean by round or truncate. So even though you're going to be giving me these as √2 and negative √2, if we were just practicing, if you rounded this first one to the nearest thousandth, what would you give me as an answer? 1.414. Because that 2 sitting in a spot says round down, which means leave the 4 alone. If that 2 was a 5 or higher, you would round up and change the 4 to a 5. What does truncate mean? Is that a new term for most of us? Truncate means, literally, I could care less if this is a 9. It literally means just drop it. Okay, so no matter what, it's not rounding, it's just drop everything after that place. Okay? So on my paper, you'll see me write R for rounding and T for truncate. If you want to practice, I do both for all my answers. Okay? Okay. So anyway, we've got that. And then, if I get rid of this, I think we're set and ready to go on. Okay? So what we want to emphasize next. So next, we're going to do 6. Let's also talk about, on your quiz and your homework, how are you going to show me work? I should not just get a bunch of answers. Okay? You need to tell me something. So I know on these what you're using, but you still should be telling me, like poly. You could just say poly gives. What I write on my paper is poly gives, and then I write maybe my coefficients that I'm typing in, just to make sure I didn't type something wrong, and that's about it. Right? So make sure you're still showing me something. Let's do 6 together. So let's go back to our main screen. Let's do poly. And now number 6 is what order? 4. Okay. So move over to 4, highlight it. Notice it automatically takes off some things, changes us to A plus BI in decimals. Okay. And let's talk about why for a minute. So complex numbers. Remember, complex numbers in our book means we're talking about imaginary, right? Like we said. So complex numbers, you need to know, this is a big thing. Make sure you get written down. Complex numbers come in conjugate pairs. Complex numbers come in conjugate pairs. Meaning, if I tell you that, let's say, for instance, I can tell you that 2 plus 3i is a root, you're supposed to automatically know that its conjugate, right, is also a root. What would its conjugate be? 2 minus 3i. So we will sometimes only give you one root, but we're really telling you 2. Well, if complex numbers come in pairs, right, then does it make sense that when this is order 4, that I could have 2 pairs? And so they're saying, oh, now there's a possibility, right, that we could have complex numbers. And so it's going to just change that form. Now, if it's really not complex, if it was a real number, it would just show up with like something like 2 plus 0i. I just have no imaginary part. Right? Go ahead.
Why don't we do the degrees? Like, why do we do those things?
There's some things in calculus that don't work unless you're in radian mode. So I'm just going to have you stay in radian mode unless we specifically do something in degrees. In this class, we don't do anything in degrees except maybe once the whole year. Okay. Good question. All right, so let's go to the next table. We need to be. Okay, now this is your format, right? Yeah. So notice for those of us that are on this calculator, different format now. This is where, if you look very carefully, they want A4. What's in front of x to the 4th? And A3 is what's in front of x cubed. That means it's including the sign. Okay, so now you would use the negative sign next to the enter, not the subtraction sign. So think about it. Is it already set equal to 0 on yours? For number 6? Everybody? Yes. Okay, what's the number in front of x to the 4th?
1.
1. How about x cubed?
There is not.
Yeah, so what's the number in front of x cubed if there is none?
0.
Bingo. 0. In front of x squared? Yep, so notice it's this negative and then 8 for center. In front of x?
0.
There are no x's, so I agree. 0 of them. And the constant?
16.
16. Okay. You'll know if you've got it typed in right. If you hit solve. First of all, how many answers do you see? 4. Do I expect 4? Yes, because it was 4 digits to the 4th power. Okay. Let's analyze a couple of things here then. So, what's this E? What's this E negative 7i thing at the end of these?
Is it that,
It is scientific notation. So it says that number times 10 to the negative 7. Okay, so let's look at this. This one says x equals negative 2. We got plus or minus, right? Do you agree? Because it's the same number. 4 point, let's practice. What if I went ahead and asked you to round? And then there's AP standard, 3 places. What would you tell me? Okay, I agree. 4.442 times 10 to the negative 7th times that. So just so you understand the format, that's what it's telling you. All right, so if you take your decimal place here and you move it 7 places this way, you're looking at 0.000004. What is that really close to? 0. We need you to understand this calculator's program that can't be always perfectly exact. but you have to be able to interpret it, right? The calculator is dumb. You guys are the ones that are smart. You run the calculator. You have to be able to interpret and understand what's happening. So you need to realize that this is really saying negative 2 plus or minus 0i. So this is really a real number. Therefore, 2 of your answers out of 4 are plus or minus 2. Take that back. Just from the one that I have written here. I take that back. Sorry about that. We just said it's negative 2 plus or minus 0. So both of these, if we're looking at these two, it's really negative 2, but if you get it twice, what are you going to tell me? There you go. Perfect. Double root. Okay, negative 2 double root. Now, from these ones right here, those are both 2. And do you agree these say the same thing again? Plus or minus 0i? So now you're really going to tell me 2, and it's twice? Double root. So does your answer account for 4 answers? It does now. Okay. You should write them separately since you're doing a double root. So we did with that section, bless you. Perfect. Next section says use the zero function from your calculator to solve and give the solutions and sketch the graph on the axes below. So if I'm giving you a quiz and I don't give you axes, that's still part of what you're doing, right? You're always going to give me a sketch and interpret for me what are you finding, right? So always keep that in mind. All right, let's do problem, let's go with the first one. Let's go with 7. Okay, make sure that you're good in that section. Okay, so I'm just doing second click till I'm out to the home screen, just make sure everything's turned off there. All right, so on on 7, we're trying to use the zero function, okay, which you did on one of those other videos. It still means everything has to be set equal to 0, right? 7, are we good with the format that it's already in? Yep. Okay. All right, so we're going to go into y equals. Let's do some troubleshooting, okay, and talk about more buttons before we have anything go wrong. So 1, if you're ever on a quiz, homework, whatever, but you're panicked for time, and all of a sudden something is not graphing, look up here to plot 1, plot 2, plot 3. If that is on, you're not going to be successful. And you have very big issues. So that's what I call troubleshooting. So that's 1. Make sure that that's not on. If those are on, sometimes different programs or games turn those on, so be careful to check that. If it is on, just go up to it, hit enter to unhighlight it, and come back down. Okay. Likewise, if I was just going to graph the line y equals 9, just this, because of this equal sign being darkened, it means if I hit graph, it will now graph the line y equals 9. If I want to turn it off because I want it to stay sitting there, you're just going to go over to the equal sign and hit enter. Notice now it is not highlighted. Okay, the equal sign is not highlighted. And now if I push graph, nothing will graph. Okay. Nice thing about that is in calculus, there's usually about 4 equations that we want to keep in there all the time because they're kind of a pain to type in. And we keep them in kind of y1, 2, 3, 4, or sometimes I have my students keep them in 5, 6, 7, and 8 and leave them there, turn them off so they're not bugging you, and then use just the first one. Okay, so keep that in mind. All right, I'm going to clear that out because that's not our equation. Let's go ahead and type this one in and all of our new experiences with this. So 3.2, now I need a variable. Remember, we said that's this button here, x. I'm raising it to the third, so here's your caret key. So to the third. Go ahead.
What's forward?
Not what we're doing right now. I'll help you sometime, tell you something else, okay? But you can't be in that mode for this to work. Okay? All right, now notice, if you keep typing, don't do this, but I'm doing it on purpose. If you keep typing, you're going to stay up there in the exponent like we talked about. So I'm going to get rid of that by going back and just hitting the delete button. How do I get it to come down so that I can go on with like plus or minus? Yeah, hit the right arrow. Okay, so notice where that cursor's come down. Now I'm going to say minus, is it 7.5? X squared, so here's X. There is a shortcut for squared. You're on this key. Notice it stays down this time. Minus 6X and plus 1.23. Do I have it typed correctly? Okay. Beautiful. It is highlighted, so I know it's going to graph. Now we need to talk about window and you guys being in control of it and so on and so forth. Okay. So if you get into window up here, this is you taking control and typing in what you want. So if you wanted to type like what I want to see on there, the smallest X value is -10, the biggest X value is 10, and the scale, meaning what are my tick marks counting by, the X scale is 1. We want you to always just use a 10 by 10 window. Okay, so they have a shortcut for that. If you will just hit zoom and standard, which is 6, a zoom standard window is always a 10 by 10 counting by 1. Okay, why do I want to know what I'm counting by? Well, if somebody is giving you the gift of not being exact and just saying, approximate for me where your zeros are. First of all, let's talk about details. 1, do you agree this is a cubic? So I'm comfortable with this, and I know that I have arrows, right? Because you're supposed to make a sketch on your paper. Are you also comfortable with it crossing 3 times, if it's a cubic? Okay. And lastly, could you not just emphasize, since I know what I'm counting by, ones, couldn't you say, well, I know it crosses somewhere between 0 and -1, somewhere between 0 and 1, and it looks like 3, right? Okay. Sometimes that's all the information that you need for calculus to be able to do just a quick estimate. So now, if I take off those details so that you can see a little bit better, okay, let's make the calculator do the work. All right, we're looking for those 3 places. So understand this key here, guys. Watch for a second. The trace key. A lot of people want to try to use the trace key. The trace key will get you a wrong answer every single time. Okay? So for instance, if I were to trace and go over here and say, oh, yeah, that's good enough. There's my X value. What's the Y value supposed to be? 0. Is it?
No.
No. That should continue to be that. It's just an approximation. Okay? It's a complete approximation. For it to be exact, you have to calculate something, which is why you use the calculate button above the trace. So you're going to go second, calculate. And now there's a lot of things here for you to calculate that you will use in your next few classes. What are we trying to find in this picture?
0.
We're trying to find zeros. So hit 2. It'll put a cursor probably in the middle of your screen. This is where you really only want to use your left and right arrow keys. Okay? So go left until you're to this one. And now let's talk about the left bound, right bound that you watched in that other video. Okay? If I am following this curve, right, if I'm coming up, following this curve this direction, and I want to be left of this 0, am I going to be above or below the x-axis? Below. Okay? If I want to be to the right of this, then I'm going to be above the x-axis. And it has to do with the curve. If I now change, okay, and I'm following the curve, so I'm following this, and I'm trying to get towards this intercept, right? Well, my left bound is going to be above or below the x-axis. Which one? Above. That's to the left, right? Because this thing is really coming down and I really emphasize it. So if I'm trying to be to the left of it, then I've got to be above it. And if I'm going to be to the right of this intercept, then I would be below the x-axis. Okay? That's what the whole left bound, right bound thing was on the other video that we talked about. Okay, so here you go. Do your left arrow key until you are definitely below the x-axis for this one. Hit enter. Okay, it's just going to put a boundary. You now want to only hit your right arrow key so you don't mess things up. Go to the right. I'm not going to guess if that's above or below, so make sure you're really to the right of it. Okay, and then push enter again, and then it's going to ask you to guess. Yeah, I want the answer. Okay, so you always hit it that 3rd time. Is the Y value what we expected now?
Yes.
It is 0. So now, practicing. If I ask you AP standards, What is this answer for x rounded? Okay, you are going to give me the 0 in front of your decimal points, and it's not positive, so it is negative 0.765. I agree with. What's that answer truncated? Negative 0.764. Is that what you said? That would be truncated. Are we good with that? Okay. If you got to do the next one, guys, you have no benefit to start over. You just hit second calculate, 0. Go ahead and do those next two quickly, or ask me a question if you've got one. But if I'm going to be to the left of the next 0, I've got to be above. Push enter. To the right of it, it's going to be below. Push enter. Go ahead and guess. Rounded or truncated, what's my x value? .171. Everybody with me? Okay. Do it again, one last time, so that you're finished with this problem. Hit the 0. Now, watch, guys, in case this is bugging you. If you start hitting your right arrow, okay, you notice all of a sudden your cursor goes off the screen. Well, sometimes it seems like you're hitting this right arrow forever, and you're like, where did it go? Is it lost? Okay? That's why I like you guys to know your scale. Don't you know for a fact that this looks like it's at 3, right? Crossing. Look at your x value right now. It's at 1.6. So are you comfortable knowing that it's off the screen? It's just down there somewhere. Watch your x value keep changing. Is it 1.9? Is it 2.1? Is it 2.2? And when it finally gets to 2.57, notice it's back on the screen. Okay? So keep going until you get close to this one. Where am I going to be for the left bound? Above or below the x-axis? Because the curve is going up, below. So go ahead and hit enter. Go to the right, that's definitely above the x-axis. Hit it one more time. Look at the y value. What's my y value supposed to be? Is that 0?
Yeah.
Remember, you're the smart one. Calculator's dumb. Yeah, it's like there's a bunch of zeros, right? So is it basically 0?
Yeah.
It is. Okay. And in fact, if you could solve this yourself, that is exactly 0. Okay. And one more time, what is my answer rounded? 2.938, I agree with. What's my answer truncated? 2.937. So you've got to be comfortable with both those expressions, round or truncate. Okay? So hopefully you have drawn a sketch, right? It should have arrows on the end, like we said. And you should just be telling me maybe like this, if it were like a test quiz or homework, that those are the numbers you're trying to find. Okay, somehow draw my attention that you know what's happening in that section. Okay? All right. I think we're good with that section. Let's talk about the next section. So, 11 through 14 says use the intersect function from your calculator to solve. Give the solution, sketch the graph, and on the axis below. So again, whether I give you the direction or not, showing work is always drawing a sketch. Okay? So let's go ahead and click out of there. We'll go into our y equals, clear that out. All right, let's talk about concept first. Concept first. So on 11, do you guys agree if nobody gave us a direction, right? We don't have a choice on this one. If nobody gave us a direction and somebody told you to solve, wouldn't you try to move everything to one side? Yeah. Set it equal to 0. Okay. And then we would try factor, right? Yep. Okay. On this one, some of the problems will get really, really complicated. You'll get to something that you can't factor. So you want to utilize the calculator technology and let it do the work. So this one is x cubed, make sure I write it down right, minus 3x, and equals, I'm just going to purposely make it a different color, x squared, or not, x squared, plus 5x plus 1. That's what your problem says, right? Okay, let's think about these separately. Let's not do any manipulation. What is the picture of the one on the left? It's a cubic, and I see you guys kind of doing that. We call it usually like an S shape or something, okay? But do you agree, since it has a positive coefficient, we know it looks like a rough sketch, maybe that. Agreed? Okay. On the right-hand side, highest power of the 2, it's a quadratic. What's a quadratic look like? Parabola, okay. So if I just draw a, doesn't necessarily mean it's for this one, but if I just draw a random parabola here, okay. Well, I notice if I want to see where they are equal, what does that mean on the graph? Where are they what? Yeah, it's where they cross each other, okay? And this parabola, guys, way out far is probably going to cross over like that. And so what are you really looking for? Not zeros, but where they intersect. You're looking for these places on your calculator. Agreed? Okay? All right, also, just so that we can talk about more keys, let's talk about this for a second. So let me take this away, and we'll come back and re-emphasize that in a minute. If I just look at the cubic, because I just want you to see this key. If I'm drawing a cubic, do you agree that it has, if I ask you what's the maximum y value, what would you tell me? Okay, so you should tell me that, like, there is none, right? Because it keeps going, keeps moving. I agree, because of the arrow. If I ask you a min, it also has the same thing. But if I ask you, there's what's called relative maxes and mins, and I just want you guys to see it, because if you notice in calculate, you've got this max and min button, minimum 3, maximum 4. So if you were to hit a minimum, guys, for instance, on this picture that I have sitting here, well, do you agree that this is a minimum point on the graph? Okay, so you could use that and calculate the x value there. They could say, what's the maximum, what's the y value or the x value at the relative maximum? That would be here. Okay, so just 2 other keys that I want you to see, but they're all always in calculate. Okay. All right, so let's draw our cubic. Let's make the calculator draw the cubic, and let's make the calculator draw our quadratic. So how are we going to do that? We're going to put one of them in y1 and one of them in y2, and have two different functions on the same set of axes. All right, so the left was x cubed, so x to the third. Remember to bring down that cursor, minus 3x. Push enter. All right, the right side, the quadratic, x squared plus 5x plus 1. Do I have them typed correctly? Will they both graph? How do I know? Yeah, both of the equal signs are highlighted, okay? I want a 10 by 10 window. How do I find a 10 by 10 window quickly? Zoom standard. So I'm going to hit zoom 6. Bam. Okay, now I know we gave you a hint, I think, on this problem, but I want you to experience what it would be like normally yourself. If you're always used to hitting a 10 by 10 window, right, and you see this problem, all right, my issue is you said we're supposed to find where they intersect, right? Okay, I see that I can find this one, I can find this one. I've got a problem finding this one that's up here, right, because it's off the screen. That means you now have to control the window. What do you really want? You want higher x or y values, higher y values, right? So you're just saying to yourself, okay, I can see everything except that. So I want my y values to go a little bit higher. So I am going to then take control of my window myself. Okay? So I like that my x's go from -10 to 10 and count by 1, so I'll just leave those alone. But maybe I say, well, because I kind of like it centered, maybe I'll say I want my y minimum to be -40. You wouldn't have to change it. You could have left it 10. But we told you that y max of 40 works. Okay, we're just giving you a gift. And I'm going to say, let's count by 5s this time. So I know on my x scale, I'm counting by 5s. My x scale, I'm counting by 1s, but on my y scale, I'm counting by 5s. Hit graph again. You'll now see it's adjusted, but now I can see the 3 intersection points. Okay? So now, if you're giving me a sketch of this, let's talk about those details first. So 1, do we agree these all have arrows? Quadratic and cubic go on forever. Right? Next, if I've got 2 curves on one graph, they must be labeled. Okay? They must be labeled for full credit. So you need to be telling me that this is your parabola, y equals the x squared plus 5x plus 1, and that this one is your cubic, y equals x cubed minus 3x. And then you would be definitely telling me that you're trying to find these 3 intersection points. So let me know what you're doing. Okay? That's what will get you credit. All right, so if I take those away so that we can go ahead and do them real quickly, then let's go for it. Back over here, we want to calculate something. So second trace. What do we want to calculate this time? An intersection between the two. Notice this cursor in the middle, and up here you have a, I do not want to do that. I just want to write on it. Notice up here you have this blue sitting here. That means the cursor's following the blue curve. Okay, that's what it means. So it says, go ahead and move using your left arrow key on the blue curve till you get close to that intersection point. And once you're there, hit enter on the first curve. It now jumps to the red curve. Notice the y2 is in red now. Well, I'm already sitting there. Go ahead and hit it. Guess always. So I always have to hit that button 3 times. I could ask you x, y, both ordered pair. Most of the time we ask you for x. Okay, so -2.295. Rounded or truncated, it would be the same. Try it again. Okay, second calculate. Intersect. You're moving to the right on the blue curve. Enter, enter, and enter. So the x value there would be -0.127, rounded or truncated. And that last one, you want to calculate the intersection. Okay. Blue, red, and enter. So the x value would be 3.422 truncated or 3.423 rounded. Okay. Again, learn your calculator, become an expert at it. We don't really do much calculator stuff, again, like as a group in class. So make sure that you're getting it down in the next couple of weeks before we quiz on it. That quiz would be probably like a short 10-minute quiz for 3 pretty intense problems. That means you know where those buttons are and not be able to, not have to answer them. Okay? All right, you have what you guys need. Practice that stuff and let me know if you need help.